Discrimination at the boarding gate left two black twin sisters stranded and humiliated. Their desperate call to their father would soon turn the tables on an entire airline. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The check-in line at Denver International Airport seemed to move in slow motion, each shuffling step forward only heightening the mixture of excitement and anxiety Maya Johnson felt. She glanced at her twin sister, Alicia Johnson, who bounced slightly on her toes, unable to contain her enthusiasm despite the tedious wait. The acceptance letters from two prestigious Boston universities were safely tucked in their backpacks, physical proof that their hard work had finally paid off. "Can you believe we're actually doing this?" Alicia whispered, her eyes bright with anticipation. "In a few hours, we'll be touring our future campuses." Maya nodded, allowing herself a small smile. "In first class, all the way there, just like Dad promised." Their father, Charles Johnson, had insisted on making their college visits special, a celebration of their academic achievements. The line inched forward, bringing them closer to the counter where airline attendant Thomas Smith stood checking in passengers. Maya noticed how his expression shifted as he scanned the crowd, his gaze passing over them as if they were invisible. When an older white couple approached from the side, Thomas immediately waved them forward. "Excuse me," Maya said, her voice calm but firm. "We were next in line." Thomas barely looked at her. "They have priority status," he replied dismissively. Though neither Maya nor Alicia had seen any indication of this, Maya felt her jaw tighten, a familiar tension building at the base of her neck. This wasn't the first time they'd been overlooked, but today was supposed to be different. Today was about their future. Alicia squeezed her sister's hand, a silent reminder of their pact not to let anything spoil this trip. "It's okay," she murmured. "We have plenty of time before boarding." The couple avoided eye contact as they moved ahead, their discomfort evident but not enough to make them refuse the preferential treatment. Maya took a deep breath, focusing on the reason for their journey rather than the slight they'd just experienced. When they finally reached the counter, Thomas Smith's eyes flicked up briefly, his expression neutral but somehow still unwelcoming. "Destination?" he asked flatly. "Boston," Maya answered, sliding their identification and first-class tickets across the counter. For the first time, Thomas seemed to actually see them, though his sudden attention wasn't comforting. Something in his gaze shifted, surprise, then skepticism, as he processed the premium tickets before him. Neither sister could have predicted that this moment, this small act of prejudice, was merely the opening scene in a drama that would test their resolve, challenge an entire corporation, and ultimately transform an industry. For now, they simply stood together, hands clasped, refusing to let anger overshadow their hopes. Thomas Smith finally turned his attention to the Johnson twins after keeping them waiting for what felt like an eternity. His eyes narrowed as they lingered on the first-class tickets in Maya's outstretched hand. Disbelief etched across his features. "How did you two manage these seats?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. The implication was clear. These teenagers couldn't possibly afford such luxury legitimately. Maya Johnson felt her cheeks burn, but maintained her composure. "Our father purchased them for us," she replied evenly, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "We're flying to Boston for university interviews." Thomas barely acknowledged her explanation, his fingers hovering over the keyboard, as if reluctant to process their boarding passes. "University interviews," he echoed with thinly veiled skepticism. "And what universities would those be?" "Harvard and MIT," Alicia responded quietly, pulling out her acceptance letter as proof, though she immediately regretted feeling the need to validate herself. The attendant's eyebrows rose dramatically before he forced a smile that never reached his eyes. "Well, isn't that ambitious?" He slowly processed their information, making a show of double-checking their IDs against the system. "Is there a problem?" Maya asked, her voice steady despite the growing knot in her stomach. "No problem at all," Thomas replied with artificial brightness. "Just being thorough, Security protocols, you understand. His gaze flicked between them and their documentation with unmistakable suspicion. A line formed behind them as Thomas deliberately prolonged the check-in process, asking questions he hadn't posed to any previous passengers. "And who exactly is your father?" he inquired, the question hanging in the air like a challenge. Alicia opened her mouth to answer, but Maya subtly shook her head. They shouldn't have to name-drop their father to receive basic respect. "Our father's identity isn't relevant to our tickets being valid," Maya stated firmly. Thomas's smile tightened as he finally handed over their boarding passes with visible reluctance. "Gate A17. Boarding begins in 90 minutes. His dismissive tone made it clear they were no longer worth his attention as he called "next in line" before they'd even collected their documents. As they walked away, Alicia whispered, "That was horrible." "I know," Maya replied, squeezing her sister's hand. "But we're through it now." Neither sister realized this interaction was merely the opening act in what would become an orchestrated series of humiliations. The dismissive glances and forced smiles from Thomas Smith were just the first ripples of a wave that would crash through their day, testing their dignity at every turn. What they couldn't know was how this seemingly routine discrimination would eventually trigger a reckoning that would shake an entire industry to its core. The security checkpoint loomed ahead like a gauntlet. Maya Johnson straightened her shoulders, passport and boarding pass in hand, trying to project confidence. Beside her, Alicia fidgeted with the strap of her backpack, the precious acceptance letter from Boston University safely tucked inside. "Next!" called the security officer, his gaze hardening as the twins approached. What should have been a routine screening quickly morphed into something else entirely. "Step aside for additional screening," he ordered, waving them toward a cordoned area where two female officers waited. The sisters exchanged glances as travelers behind them moved swiftly through the main line. "Is there a problem?" Maya asked, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. The officer didn't answer, merely gesturing again toward the secondary screening area. As the twins complied, Alicia whispered, "This isn't right." "Maya." The female officers began their work with mechanical precision. They patted down every inch of the teenagers' bodies, their hands lingering longer than necessary. One officer dumped the contents of Alicia's carefully packed backpack onto the table, rifling through her personal items with undisguised suspicion. "What are you looking for?" Alicia asked, her voice cracking as the officer unfolded her acceptance letter, scanning it with narrowed eyes. "Just doing our job," came the curt reply. Maya watched helplessly as her sister's eyes welled with tears. Behind them, a line of impatient travelers had formed, some checking watches, others openly staring. A few shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the injustice unfolding but remaining silent. "These look expensive," remarked one officer, examining Maya's headphones. "Receipt?" "They were a graduation gift from our father," Maya explained, feeling heat rise to her cheeks as she added, "Charles Johnson." The name meant nothing to the officer, who continued her search with undiminished suspicion. Each new accusation, implied but never stated outright, felt heavier than the last. Were the laptops stolen? Why were they flying first class? How could they afford these items? "Please," Alicia pleaded, her voice trembling as she tried to gather her scattered belongings. "We're going to miss our flight." Maya reached for her sister's hand, squeezing it tightly. "Focus on Boston," she whispered, "on what waits for us there. We can't let them ruin this." Finally cleared, the twins reclaimed their possessions and hurried toward their gate. Though no one followed them physically, the weight of unwanted attention pressed on their shoulders. Maya felt eyes tracking their movement through the terminal, the sensation of being watched, of being unwanted, clinging to them like an invisible shadow. "I've never felt so exposed," Alicia murmured. Maya nodded, understanding perfectly. They'd been stripped not just of dignity but of the simple right to move through the world unburdened by suspicion. Maya and Alicia Johnson approached Gate 37 with weary smiles, their university acceptance letters safely tucked away in their backpacks. The journey through security had been exhausting, but the promise of comfortable first-class seats offered some consolation. Maya's optimism faltered when she noticed the gate attendant's expression shift upon seeing them. "I'm sorry, but there seems to be an issue with your tickets," the attendant said, not sounding sorry at all. She tapped at her computer with practiced indifference. "Your first-class seats have been reassigned. We can accommodate you in economy." "What? That's impossible!" Alicia protested, her voice rising. "We checked in hours ago. Those seats are confirmed." The attendant slid 2 new boarding passes across the counter. "It's a full flight. These are the only seats available now." Maya examined the economy tickets with disbelief. This wasn't a mistake. It was the culmination of every slight they'd endured since arriving at Denver International Airport. Her sister's hands trembled with indignation as she pulled out her smartphone. "I'm calling Dad right now," Alicia declared, scrolling through her contacts. "This is ridiculous." Maya gently lowered her twin's device. "Wait, Dad's in that board meeting, remember? The one he's been preparing for all month." She glanced at her watch, calculating the time. Charles Johnson had specifically mentioned how crucial today's meeting was for Continental Skies Airlines. Ironically, the very company whose employees were now discriminating against his daughters. "I don't care," Alicia insisted, her eyes glistening with frustrated tears. "He would want to know about this." Maya hesitated, torn between their immediate distress and their father's professional obligations. "Let's try to handle this ourselves first," she suggested, squeezing her sister's hand. "We can speak to a supervisor, file a formal complaint. If that doesn't work, then we call him." Reluctantly, Alicia nodded, tucking her phone away. "Fine. But if one more person treats us like we don't belong here, I'm calling him immediately." Neither sister realized how prophetic those words would become. Their decision to handle the situation independently, to prove they could navigate this injustice without parental intervention, would lead them down a path of escalating humiliations. In the hours that followed, this moment of restraint would replay in Maya's mind countless times. A crossroads where everything might have changed had they made a different choice. As they moved toward the customer service desk, Maya felt eyes following them across the terminal. The weight of those stairs pressed down on her shoulders, heavier than any luggage they carried. Maya and Alicia Johnson retreated from the gate, their shoulders slumped with the weight of repeated rejections. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries drifted from an airport restaurant, reminding them they hadn't eaten since early morning. "Maybe some food will help us think more clearly," Maya suggested, her voice strained but determined. Her twin nodded, clutching her acceptance letter from Boston University like a talisman. The restaurant buzzed with travelers, but numerous tables sat empty. A hostess with a plastic smile looked up as they approached, her eyes scanning them briefly before her expression hardened. "I'm sorry. We're fully booked right now," she stated flatly, despite the visible empty tables scattered throughout the establishment. "But there are at least 7 empty tables," Alicia pointed out, her voice quivering slightly. "We just need a quick bite before—" "Those are reserved," the hostess interrupted, not bothering to check any reservation system. "You'll have to try somewhere else." The dismissal was painfully familiar. Alicia's eyes welled with tears as she turned away, the shame burning her cheeks. Maya grabbed her sister's hand, squeezing it tightly as they stood frozen, unsure where to go next in a terminal that seemed determined to reject them at every turn. "Hey," came a soft voice from behind the counter. Elena Morales, a waitress with kind eyes and a determined set to her jaw, approached with 2 glasses of water. "Why don't you wait over there for a moment?" She nodded toward a small alcove near the entrance. The twins exchanged confused glances, but followed her suggestion. Moments later, Elena appeared beside them, glancing over her shoulder to ensure no one was watching. "I'm sorry about that," she whispered, handing them the water. "It's not right what they're doing to you." Alicia accepted the glass with trembling hands. "We're used to it," she murmured, though her eyes betrayed how much each new rejection still hurt. You shouldn't have to be, Elena replied firmly. She slipped them each a wrapped sandwich from her apron pocket. On the house, and listen, I saw what happened at the check-in counter earlier. If you need someone to speak up for you, I saw everything. Maya studied the woman's face, searching for any sign of insincerity but finding only genuine empathy. Thank you, she said, her voice barely audible over the restaurant chatter. My shift ends in 20 minutes, Elena continued, her eyes fierce with determination. If you need a witness or just someone in your corner, I'll be there. She scribbled her phone number on a napkin and pressed it into Maya's palm. For the first time since arriving at Denver International Airport, the twins felt a flicker of hope. Someone had seen them, truly seen them, and was willing to stand beside them. The sisters approached the gate with renewed determination, hoping to finally board their flight to Boston. Maya Johnson clutched her acceptance letter like a talisman, while Alicia kept scanning the crowd, as if looking for another friendly face like Eleanor's. Before they could reach the counter, a woman in a crisp airline uniform intercepted them. I'm Diane Brown, customer service supervisor, she said, her voice low and hurried. Let's talk over here. She guided them to a quiet corner, away from other passengers. Maya noticed something familiar in Diane's eyes, a shared experience. Perhaps, but the supervisor's body language betrayed discomfort, shoulders hunched as if carrying an invisible weight. Look, I understand what you're going through, Diane began, glancing nervously over her shoulder. I've been there more times than I can count. Alicia's expression brightened momentarily. Then you can help us. We just want to board our flight like everyone else. The supervisor's face fell. That's not why I pulled you aside. She leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. Sometimes it's better to stay quiet. You don't want to make things worse for yourselves. Maya stared at her, stunned. Worse? How could it possibly get worse? Trust me, Diane continued, straightening her name badge. I've worked here for 15 years. The system doesn't change for people like us. You make noise, you get labeled a troublemaker, and next time, you might not get on any flight at all. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Alicia's eyes welled with tears, but Maya felt something different stirring inside her. Not sadness, but indignation. So we should just accept being humiliated? Maya asked, her voice steady despite the anger building within her. Pretend it's normal to be treated this way? Diane's expression hardened. I'm trying to help you. No, Maya replied, the realization crystallizing in her mind. You're helping them. The supervisor flinched, as if slapped. She straightened her jacket and stepped back. Do what you want. I tried. With that, she turned and walked briskly toward the staff area, never looking back. Maya watched her retreat, understanding washing over her like a cold wave. Silence wasn't protection, it was permission. Every person who stayed quiet, who accepted mistreatment as inevitable, became part of the problem. She turned to her sister, a new fire in her eyes. Alicia, we're not backing down. Alicia nodded, wiping away tears. What do we do now? Maya squared her shoulders, the weight of their father's position suddenly feeling less like a last resort and more like responsibility. We stop being invisible. Final boarding for flight 623 to Boston. All remaining passengers please proceed to gate 12. The announcement echoed through the terminal as Maya and Alicia Johnson approached the boarding gate, their university acceptance letters safely tucked away in their backpacks. Gregory Evans stood at the podium, his posture rigid and his smile practiced to perfection. As the twins presented their boarding passes, his expression shifted subtly. I'm afraid there's an issue with your documentation, he said, voice honeyed with false concern. We'll need to conduct additional security checks before you can board. Maya's stomach dropped. But we've already been through security twice, she protested, keeping her voice measured despite the frustration building inside her. Company policy, Gregory replied, with a dismissive shrug. Please step aside. The sisters moved to the corner of the gate area, watching helplessly as other passengers streamed past them onto the aircraft. An elderly white couple approached the counter, and Gregory's demeanor transformed instantly. His smile reached his eyes as he scanned their tickets. "Oh, it seems we have an upgrade available," he announced cheerfully. "You'll be in first class today." Alicia gasped as she realized what was happening. "Those are our seats," she whispered to her sister. Maya stepped forward. "Excuse me, but those were the seats we purchased. We have the confirmation right here." She held up her smartphone, displaying their electronic tickets. Gregory barely glanced at the device. "I'm sorry, but the system shows these passengers were next in line for an upgrade. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding on your part." The gate area had nearly emptied now. Alicia's composure finally broke, her voice cracking as she addressed the airline employee. "Please," she begged, tears welling in her eyes. "We've been saving for these tickets all year. We're starting college next week. This isn't fair." A few remaining passengers glanced over uncomfortably, but no one intervened. Gregory's expression hardened as he lowered his voice. "If you continue to make a scene, I'll be forced to call security. Now, either take the economy seats I've reassigned you or miss your flight entirely. Your choice." The cold indifference in his tone was worse than outright hostility. Maya put her arm around her trembling sister, feeling something fundamental break inside her, a faith in fairness, in systems working as they should. "We'll take the seats," Maya said quietly, her dignity the only thing she refused to surrender. As they finally boarded, walking past the first-class cabin where the elderly couple was already being served complimentary drinks, Alicia wiped her tears. "This isn't right," she whispered. "No," Maya agreed, her jaw set with determination. "And it's not over." Maya's hands trembled with barely contained fury as she pulled her smartphone from her pocket. She'd tried to handle this situation maturely, but enough was enough. Alicia stood beside her, tears of frustration welling in her eyes as fellow passengers boarded the plane that should have included them. "I'm calling Dad," Maya announced, her voice steadier than she felt. Charles Johnson answered on the second ring. Despite being in the middle of a critical board meeting, his voice carried the measured calm that had propelled him to the CEO position at Continental Skies Airlines just 3 months prior. "Maya, is everything all right?" he asked, immediately sensing the tension in his daughter's voice. The words tumbled out of her mouth, the discriminatory treatment at check-in, Thomas Smith's condescension, the security harassment, their reassigned seats, and finally, Gregory Evans blocking them from boarding while giving their seats away. Alicia leaned in, occasionally adding details Maya missed through her anger. They didn't even try to hide it. "Dad," Maya said, her voice cracking, "they looked right at us while doing it." The silence on the other end lasted only seconds, but felt eternal. When Charles finally spoke, his tone had transformed, still controlled, but with an undercurrent of steel that both twins recognized from the rare occasions when their father's principles had been violated. "Put me on speaker," he instructed. Maya complied, holding the device between herself and Alicia. Several passengers nearby glanced curiously at the twins. "I want you both to find a quiet place to sit," Charles directed. "I'm going to handle this immediately. No one treats my daughters this way, or anyone else's children. For that matter." "What are you going to do?" Alicia asked, wiping away tears. "First, I'm going to make some calls. Then I'm going to make sure this never happens again. Not to you, not to anyone." His confidence radiated through the phone. "This ends today." The twins exchanged glances, relief washing over them. Their father had always been their champion, but they'd never heard this particular edge in his voice before. "Give me 30 minutes, Charles continued. "I promise you'll see results. This isn't just about you two anymore. It's about every person who's ever been silently mistreated by this airline." As they ended the call, Maya felt a flicker of hope replace her anger. Neither she nor Alicia could possibly imagine the seismic corporate upheaval their father was about to unleash, a response that would ground planes, shake executives, and ultimately transform an entire industry. "Do you think he can really fix this?" Alicia whispered. Maya squeezed her sister's hand. "I don't think he's going to fix it," she replied. "I think he's going to change it completely." Charles Johnson's voice trembled with barely contained fury as he ended the call with his daughters. Within seconds, he activated Protocol Alpha, an emergency measure so rarely used that most Continental Skies employees had only heard rumors of its existence. With a few keystrokes and authorization codes, every flight under the company's banner worldwide received immediate grounding orders. At Denver International Airport, the announcement echoed through the terminal like a thunderclap. "Attention all passengers. All Continental Skies flights have been temporarily suspended. We apologize for the inconvenience and will provide updates as they become available." Maya and Alicia watched in stunned silence as the digital departure boards flickered, their flight statuses changing from on time to delayed and finally to cancelled. Around them, chaos erupted. Business travelers shouted into phones, families with young children slumped against walls in despair, and elderly passengers looked around in confusion. "Did Dad really just—" Alicia whispered, unable to finish her sentence. "He did," Maya confirmed, a mixture of vindication and disbelief washing over her. "He shut down everything." Airport staff rushed between gates, their faces masks of panic and confusion. No one had answers. Supervisors huddled in corners, frantically calling headquarters while trying to maintain some semblance of control. Diane Brown, who had dismissed the twins earlier, now darted nervous glances in their direction. Her earlier confidence evaporated. Within 30 minutes, news vans began arriving outside the terminal. Reporters with microphones and camera crews pushed through the crowd, hungry for the story behind the unprecedented shutdown. The words discrimination and civil rights buzzed through the terminal as passengers pieced together fragments of information. "There they are," someone pointed, and suddenly Maya and Alicia found themselves surrounded by journalists. "Are you the Johnson twins?" A reporter thrust a microphone toward them. "Is it true your father is Charles Johnson, CEO of Continental Skies? Can you tell us what happened today?" Before they could respond, security personnel formed a protective circle around them. Through the crowd, they spotted Gregory Evans, the employee who had blocked their boarding, being cornered by another news crew. His face had lost all color. Maya's smartphone buzzed with a text from their father. "Stay where you are. I'm sending someone to get you. This is just the beginning." The twins exchanged glances, realizing the magnitude of what was unfolding. What had started as personal humiliation was transforming into something much larger, a public reckoning that would force not just Continental Skies, but the entire industry to confront its darkest practices. "Do you think he knew this would happen?" Alicia asked quietly. Maya watched as more cameras arrived, more flights were cancelled, and more passengers joined the growing chorus of outrage. "I think," she said slowly, "he was just waiting for the right moment." Inside the boardroom at Continental Skies Airlines, chaos erupted as executives frantically paced around the mahogany table. Victor Carter slammed his fist down, his tailored suit unable to mask the panic in his eyes. "This is a PR nightmare," the COO barked at the crisis management team. "The two teenagers are threatening to destroy everything we've built." He pulled up social media feeds showing footage of Maya and Alicia Johnson speaking calmly to reporters outside the terminal. "We need to discredit them immediately," Victor continued, loosening his tie. "Push the narrative that these girls are entitled troublemakers, causing unnecessary disruptions for thousands of travelers." Within minutes, the company's social media accounts began posting carefully crafted statements. Continental Skies apologizes for today's inconvenience caused by a misunderstanding with two passengers who refused to follow standard security protocols. Paid advertisements appeared online, portraying the twins as privileged teenagers throwing tantrums when they didn't get their way. Anonymous accounts, traced back to company IP addresses, shared doctored images suggesting Maya and Alicia had been disruptive at the airport. "Make sure to emphasize the economic impact," Victor instructed the marketing director. Every minute we're grounded costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. The public needs to blame them, not us. But the executives hadn't anticipated the twins' composure. When local news stations interviewed Maya and Alicia, they spoke with remarkable clarity, describing each discriminatory interaction without embellishment or accusation. "We just want to be treated with the same respect as everyone else," Maya explained, her voice steady despite the cameras and microphones thrust in her face. "This isn't about special treatment, it's about equal treatment," Alicia added. "We didn't ask for all flights to be grounded, we simply wanted accountability." Their dignity in the face of corporate attacks resonated with viewers. Support flooded in from unexpected places. Pilots from competing airlines posted messages of solidarity, and former Continental Skies employees began sharing similar stories of discrimination they'd witnessed or experienced. Back in the boardroom, Victor stared in disbelief at the shifting public sentiment. How are these kids winning the PR battle against our entire communications department? A junior executive cautiously raised her hand. "Sir, perhaps we should consider that they're telling the truth." Victor silenced her with a glare, but the damage was already done. Other board members exchanged uncomfortable glances, suddenly questioning their strategy. Outside, hashtags supporting the Johnson sisters trended worldwide. Celebrity influencers shared the twins' story, and civil rights organizations issued statements of support. What began as a corporate attempt to silence two teenagers had inadvertently amplified their voices to a global audience. The smear campaign had backfired spectacularly. Calvin Harris stared at his computer screen, the cursor blinking over the email from Victor Carter. The message was clear. Delete all security footage and communications related to the Johnson twins incident. As IT director at Continental Skies Airlines for 7 years, Calvin had received questionable requests before, but nothing this blatant. He pulled up the security footage from Denver International Airport, watching as Maya and Alicia Johnson approached the check-in counter. Thomas Smith's body language changed instantly. The slight turn away, the dismissive gesture. Calvin forwarded through more footage, the twins being pulled aside at security, their confused expressions as Gregory Evans blocked them from boarding. "This isn't right," he muttered, running a hand through his graying hair. The twins' composure throughout the ordeal struck him. They reminded him of his own daughters, the dignity with which they carried themselves even as the system worked against them. Calvin opened another window containing internal emails. Thomas had messaged Diane Brown before the twins even reached the counter. 2 teenagers with first-class tickets. "Something seems off." Diane's response made his stomach turn. "You know the protocol for situations like these." The IT director leaned back in his chair, the weight of the decision before him pressing down. 20 years until retirement, a comfortable pension. All he had to do was press delete and walk away. His phone buzzed, a news alert about Charles Johnson implementing Protocol Alpha. Calvin had never seen it activated in his entire tenure. The CEO was fighting for his daughters, consequences be damned. "If he can risk everything," Calvin whispered, "so can I." He began copying files to an encrypted drive, security footage, email chains, passenger complaints dating back 3 years, showing a pattern of similar incidents. The system logs would show his activity, but he worked quickly, covering his tracks where possible. A knock at his office door made him freeze. Harris. "Carter wants an update on that cleanup," called a voice from the hallway. "Tell him it's in progress," Calvin replied, his voice steadier than he felt. After the footsteps faded, he finished the backup and slipped the drive into his pocket. He then created a convincing but incomplete deletion record that would satisfy a cursory check. The most damning evidence appeared gone but remained preserved. Calvin sent a vague confirmation email to Victor, knowing the COO wouldn't understand the technical details. As he hit send, he thought of Maya and Alicia Johnson standing their ground at the airport. Sometimes justice required more than following orders. It demanded courage. He patted the drive in his pocket, When the time came, the truth would speak for itself. Within 24 hours, the twins' story had ignited a firestorm across social media platforms. Maya Johnson sat cross-legged on her hotel bed, scrolling through her smartphone with wide eyes as hashtags like Continental Justice and The Fly Fair now dominated trending lists worldwide. Alicia leaned against her shoulder, equally mesmerized by the avalanche of support flooding their notifications. "I can't believe this," Maya whispered, her voice catching as she read comment after comment. "You listen to this one. Denied boarding in Seattle last year because they overbooked, but watched them seat 3 white passengers right after me." The sisters exchanged glances as more stories poured in. What had begun as their personal humiliation was rapidly transforming into something much larger, a collective reckoning. Passengers from across the country shared eerily similar experiences, mysterious security checks that targeted only certain travelers, unexplained seat reassignments, and staff who seemed trained to question the legitimacy of first-class tickets held by people who looked like them. "Dad needs to see these," Alicia said, forwarding screenshots to Charles Johnson. Their father had been locked in emergency meetings since triggering Protocol Alpha, but these testimonials would provide crucial ammunition. A notification pinged. Elena Morales had sent them a message. The waitress who had shown them kindness at the airport restaurant had become an unexpected ally, sharing her own observations of discriminatory practices she'd witnessed during her shifts. "Stay strong," her message read. "People are listening now." The twins watched in real time as news outlets picked up the story. Their phones buzzed constantly with interview requests from major networks. Even celebrities and influencers were weighing in, amplifying the conversation and forcing Continental Skies to respond beyond their initial dismissive statement. "They can't bury this anymore," Maya said, her voice steadier now. She clicked on a video that showed protesters gathering outside Continental Skies headquarters in Chicago, holding signs with the twins' names. Alicia squeezed her sister's hand. "Remember when Diane Brown told us to stay quiet, that keeping silent would make things easier?" Maya nodded, recalling the supervisor's well-intentioned but misguided advice. "And now look, all these people finding their voices because we didn't lose ours." The sisters fell silent as they watched a live news segment featuring Calvin Harris, the IT director, being interviewed anonymously with his face obscured. Though careful with his words, he confirmed that complaints similar to the twins had been systematically buried for years. "We never meant to start a movement," Alicia whispered. "Maybe that's exactly why it worked," Maya replied. "This isn't about us anymore. It's about everyone who's ever been made to feel invisible." The boardroom fell silent as Charles Johnson strode in, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a controlled fury that made even the most seasoned executives shift uncomfortably in their leather chairs. The emergency meeting had been called with less than an hour's notice, leaving no time for the board members to coordinate their defenses. "What you're about to see," Charles began, his voice steady but charged with emotion, "is not an isolated incident involving my daughters. It is the tip of an iceberg that we've been deliberately ignoring for years." He nodded to Calvin Harris, who dimmed the lights and projected a series of documents onto the wall. Complaint forms, internal memos, and statistical analyses filled the screen, all bearing the unmistakable pattern of systematic discrimination that Continental Skies had buried. 273 formal complaints in the past 18 months alone, Charles continued, pointing to a highlighted figure, all conveniently classified as resolved without any actual resolution. His gaze swept across the room, lingering on the board members who had overseen customer relations. Victor Carter leaned forward, his expensive suit creasing as he attempted to interject. "Charles, with all due respect—" "Respect?" Charles cut him off. "Is that what we showed when we instructed our staff to flag certain passengers for additional screening based on nothing but appearance? Is that what we demonstrated when we buried these reports?" The CEO pulled up email threads showing explicit instructions to downplay incidents and redirect complaints to departments with no authority to address them. Several board members visibly paled as they recognized their own names in the correspondence. "My daughters were humiliated yesterday," he said, his voice finally breaking slightly. "But they are not alone. This has been happening under our watch, with our silent approval for far too long." An older board member, Margaret Wilson, removed her glasses slowly. "I had no idea the numbers were this significant," she admitted, the first crack in the wall of denial. "Because we designed the system to hide them," Charles replied. "We created a culture where Diane Brown felt it was safer to tell two young women to accept discrimination than to stand up against it." He pulled up the final slide, a comprehensive reform proposal that would fundamentally reshape the company's approach to equity and accountability. "This stops today," he declared, "not with token gestures or empty promises, but with structural change that will make Continental Skies the industry standard for fairness." The boardroom remained silent for several long seconds after he finished. Then, unexpectedly, applause began from the corner where the newest board member sat. Others gradually joined, some reluctantly, some with genuine conviction. For the first time since the crisis began, Charles allowed himself to feel something beyond anger and determination, hope that real change might actually be possible. The packed boardroom fell silent as Charles Johnson stood at the head of the table. The large display behind him showed faces of employees caught in discriminatory acts, including Thomas Smith and Gregory Evans. The tension was palpable. Most executives expected standard corporate damage control: fire the offenders, issue apologies, move on. "Termination is the easy way out," Charles announced, his voice steady. "It allows us to pretend the problem walked out the door with those employees." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Today, we're taking a different approach." The CEO unveiled his plan. Instead of termination, offending employees would undergo comprehensive 6-month re-education programs while remaining employed. Their salaries, however, would be diverted to civil rights organizations for the duration. "We're not throwing people away," he continued. "We're transforming them into ambassadors for change." Murmurs erupted around the table. Several shareholders shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One executive objected, "This is unprecedented. The financial impact will be less costly than losing our moral compass." Charles interrupted. "Continental Skies will lead by example." Across town, Maya and Alicia sat in their living room, watching their father's press conference, announcing the new policy. The twins exchanged glances as reporters fired questions about the controversial approach. "Do you think it will work?" Alicia asked, twirling her acceptance letter from Boston University between her fingers, the same letter that had been in her backpack during their airport ordeal. Maya considered the question. "I don't know. Part of me feels vindicated. But you're worried it's just for show," her sister finished. "Exactly." Maya leaned forward, studying their father's confident expression on the television. "What if these people just pretend to change? What if the whole system is too broken?" Their conversation was interrupted by a notification on Maya's phone, a message from Elena Morales, the waitress who had shown them kindness. She had sent a screenshot of an internal company memo detailing the new policy, along with her own message. "Your father is turning the industry upside down. People are talking, really talking." The twins felt a complex mixture of pride and uncertainty. Their private humiliation had transformed into something larger than themselves, a corporate revolution that challenged deeply entrenched practices. "At least they can't ignore us anymore," Alicia said softly. Maya nodded, remembering the cold dismissal in Thomas Smith's eyes when he'd questioned their first-class tickets. "That's something," she agreed, "but I wonder what happens when the cameras turn away." The sisters sat in contemplative silence, understanding that vindication was just the beginning of a much longer journey toward genuine change. Victor Carter paced his corner office, his reflection distorted in the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Denver skyline. The Continental Sky's COO slammed his fist against his mahogany desk, sending his coffee mug crashing to the floor. Everything he'd built over 20 years was crumbling because of two teenage girls and their crusading father. "They think they can just waltz in and rewrite company policy," he muttered, frantically dialing numbers on his smartphone. One by one, he called his allies at partner airlines, investment firms, and media outlets. His voice shifted from rage to smooth persuasion as he spun the narrative. Charles Johnson was destroying shareholder value with his emotional overreaction to a minor customer service incident. By afternoon, several business publications had run articles questioning Charles's leadership. The stock price dipped slightly, not enough but a start. Victor smiled for the first time in days. The board meeting was in 48 hours. He just needed to build enough pressure. His assistant knocked timidly. "Sir, Maya and Alicia Johnson are here to see you." Victor straightened his tie, composing his features into a mask of concern. "Send them in." The twins entered cautiously, Maya's posture defiant while Alicia hung back slightly. The executive gestured toward the leather chairs across from his desk. "I thought we should talk privately," he began, his voice gentle. "This situation has gotten out of hand." "We didn't ask for any of this," Maya replied. "We just wanted to be treated with respect." Victor's facade cracked. "Respect? Do you understand what you've done? Your little airport tantrum has cost this company millions." Alicia flinched, but her sister remained steady. "Our tantrum exposed discrimination that's been happening for years." The executive leaned forward, voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Listen carefully. Your father might be CEO, but I control the board. Back off now, or I'll make sure everyone knows how two privileged girls manipulated a family connection to cause chaos. Your college acceptances, your future careers. I can destroy it all with one phone call." What Victor didn't notice was Alicia's trembling hand, which had slipped her device from her pocket when he began speaking. The recording uploaded automatically to her cloud storage. 3 hours later, the audio file exploded across social media. By evening, it had reached every major news network. The recording revealed not just threats against teenagers, but confirmed the company's awareness of discriminatory practices. By morning, Victor Carter faced a boardroom of stone-faced executives. No allies remained. His resignation letter was already drafted, waiting only for his signature. As he cleared out his office, the disgraced COO caught a glimpse of Charles Johnson walking past with his daughters, their heads held high. The revolution they'd started was just beginning. The boardroom buzzed with anticipation as Charles Johnson stood before the newly assembled executives. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the determination on his face. 3 weeks after Victor Carter's spectacular downfall, Continental Sky's Airlines was entering uncharted territory. "Today marks the beginning of real change," Charles announced, his voice carrying the weight of both authority and hope. Not just cosmetic fixes or empty promises. He unveiled a comprehensive transformation plan that left even the most skeptical board members nodding in approval. New diversity metrics would track everything from hiring practices to customer interactions, with quarterly reports made public. Customer service standards would be completely overhauled with transparency as the cornerstone. Every complaint would be documented, addressed, and followed up on within 48 hours. Most revolutionary was the Responsibility Board, a diverse oversight committee with real power to implement change. Former victims of discrimination would hold permanent seats, ensuring lived experiences guided policy decisions. And I'm proud to announce that my daughters, Maya and Alicia, will serve as special advisors to this board, Charles said, his pride evident. Their courage has shown us exactly what needs to change. Back at their temporary apartment in Denver, the twins received the news with mixed emotions. Maya paced across the living room, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. "Dad wants us to help shape the new policies," she told her sister, still processing the magnitude of what was happening. Alicia looked up from her laptop, where she'd been reviewing messages of support that continued to flood their social media accounts. "Are you sure we're qualified? We're just students." "That's exactly why our perspective matters," Maya replied, sitting beside her twin. "We experienced the problem firsthand. Who better to help fix it?" For the first time since that fateful day at the airport, the sisters felt a sense of purpose replacing their anger. Their humiliation was transforming into something powerful, a catalyst for systemic change that would protect countless others. When Calvin Harris called later that evening to congratulate them, his voice carried genuine admiration. The IT director had been appointed to head the new transparency initiative, his ethical stance during the crisis earning him newfound respect throughout the company. "What you two started," he told them, "is changing everything, not just policies, but people's hearts." As Maya hung up the device, she caught Alicia's eye across the room. No words were needed between them. They both felt it. Their voices, once silenced at an airport counter, now resonated through boardrooms and beyond. Their pain had purpose, their struggle had meaning, and for the first time, the future they helped shape seemed genuinely possible. 6 months later, Maya and Alicia Johnson stepped through the sliding doors of Denver International Airport with a mixture of apprehension and determination. The memories of their last visit still lingered, but they had promised themselves they wouldn't let fear dictate their lives. The twins had returned to face their past and witness firsthand the changes their ordeal had sparked. The difference was immediately apparent. The check-in area, once a battleground of prejudice, now hummed with efficiency and respect. A staff member noticed them hesitating and approached with a genuine smile. "Can I help you find your way?" she asked, her tone devoid of the condescension they'd grown to expect. Maya exchanged a surprised glance with her sister. "We're fine, thank you," she replied, watching as the employee nodded and moved on to assist another traveler. As they navigated through security, the twins braced themselves for the familiar sting of unwarranted scrutiny. Instead, they were processed with the same efficiency as everyone else. No extra pat-downs, no suspicious glances at their belongings, no performative displays of authority. "It's almost unsettling," Alicia whispered, as they collected their bags from the scanner. "I keep waiting for something to go wrong." The sisters made their way toward their gate, noting the subtle changes throughout the terminal. New signage about passenger rights hung prominently on walls. Staff wore pins declaring dignity first, alongside their name badges. Even the atmosphere felt lighter, as if the very air had been cleansed of tension. At Gate 23, the same gate where they'd been humiliated 6 months earlier, Diane Brown stood checking boarding passes. The supervisor's eyes widened in recognition as the twins approached. Unlike their last encounter, she didn't look away or lower her voice. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and met their gaze directly. "Maya, Alicia," she said, using their first names with a warmth that surprised them both. "I was hoping I'd see you again someday." The twins exchanged cautious glances. Diane seemed to understand their hesitation. She stepped aside, creating a moment of privacy away from the flow of passengers. "What you two did," she began, her voice steady but humble. "It wasn't just about one airline or one incident. You helped us change for the better, all of us." Alicia's expression softened slightly. "Are things really different, or is this just for show?" Diane nodded, acknowledging the fair question. "Your father implemented quarterly anonymous surveys for employees to report discrimination. Last month, I used it myself to report an incident. The response was immediate." She paused, emotion briefly crossing her face. "For 20 years, I kept my head down. Now I don't have to anymore." Maya felt something unexpected, a sense of closure beginning to form where raw injustice had once festered. Elena Morales rushed forward the moment she spotted Maya and Alicia Johnson entering the terminal. 6 months had transformed not just the airport, but Elena herself. The former waitress now wore a supervisor's badge that caught the light as she wrapped the twins in a warm embrace. "You inspired more than you know," Elena said, her eyes shining with gratitude. "After that day, I couldn't stay silent anymore. When they offered me this position, I almost didn't take it, afraid I'd become part of the system. But then I thought about what you two did." Maya smiled, noticing how Elena stood taller now, confidence radiating from her posture. "The promotion suits you," she said, genuinely happy for the woman who had been their only ally that terrible day. "It's more than just a better paycheck," Elena explained, guiding them toward a quieter corner of the bustling terminal. "I'm training all new staff personally. We've implemented a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. Every complaint gets investigated, no exceptions." Alicia glanced around at the diverse faces working throughout the terminal, a stark contrast to their previous experience. "It feels completely different here," she observed, her voice soft with wonder. "Because of you," Elena insisted. "After your story broke, 3 other employees came forward with similar experiences. They'd been silenced for years." She lowered her voice. "The old management called it isolated incidents. Your father called it what it was, a pattern." Maya watched passengers flowing through security, treated with consistent respect regardless of appearance. A young black family passed by, receiving the same courteous treatment as everyone else. No extra searches, no suspicious glances. Continental Skies is now the industry benchmark for inclusivity training, Elena continued. "Other airlines are sending representatives to learn our protocols. What happened to you was horrible, but look at the change you created." Alicia's eyes welled with tears. "We were just trying to get to Boston, and you started a revolution instead," Elena replied, squeezing her hand. As they prepared to continue their journey, Maya realized their ordeal had transcended personal vindication. Their stand had become a catalyst, not just for Continental Skies, but for everyone who had witnessed their courage and found their own. "Your father is an incredible man," Elena added, "but what you two did, standing your ground when everyone expected you to back down, that's what truly changed things. You showed people that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be invisible." The airport announcement system chimed overhead, but this time it didn't fill the twins with dread. This time it simply meant their journey could continue, exactly as it always should have. The impact of the Johnson twins stand against Continental Skies Airlines reverberated far beyond Denver International Airport. Within weeks, major competitors like SkyWest, Delta, and American Airlines scrambled to implement their own anti-discrimination policies, fearing similar public relations disasters. Maya Johnson sat cross-legged on her dorm room bed at Boston University, watching CNN's special report on the transformation sweeping through the aviation industry. "In an unprecedented move," the anchor reported, "the Federal Aviation Administration has announced new guidelines requiring all commercial airlines to adopt transparent customer service metrics and anti-discrimination training." Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Alicia. "Are you seeing this? We did that." The sisters had become reluctant symbols of a movement they never intended to start. What began as a humiliating experience at an airport check-in counter had catalyzed a nationwide conversation about dignity, respect, and accountability in customer service. Charles Johnson called that evening, his voice carrying a mixture of pride and weariness. "The Continental Board just approved our new passenger Bill of Rights," he said, "and 3 other airlines have already requested copies of our training materials." "I never thought it would go this far," Maya admitted, watching students pass by her dormitory window. "Neither did they," her father replied. "That's why it worked. Industry publications ran features on Continental's transformation, with headlines like "From Crisis to Conscience," how one airline rewrote the rules. Even Victor Carter's replacement as COO had publicly acknowledged that the company's new direction had improved both employee satisfaction and quarterly profits. Calvin Harris, whose preserved evidence had been crucial to the case, received a promotion to head a newly formed Ethics and Compliance division. During a video call with the twins, he confessed, "I almost deleted those files. Thank you for giving me the courage to do the right thing." The most surprising development came when the Transportation Secretary invited Maya and Alicia to Washington to participate in a roundtable on consumer rights in the transportation sector. Their experience had become a case study in how individual voices could spark institutional change. Maya found herself staring at the invitation email in disbelief. She remembered Diane Brown's words at the airport, "Sometimes it's better to stay quiet." How wrong that advice had been. That night, watching footage of flight attendants undergoing new sensitivity training, Maya felt a profound sense of accomplishment wash over her. What they'd endured, the humiliation, the discrimination, the fear, had transformed into something powerful and lasting. "And we didn't just change one airline," she whispered to herself. "We changed the way people expect to be treated." The thought carried her into sleep. Her dreams no longer haunted by that terrible day, but filled instead with the possibilities that courage had unlocked. Standing at the boarding gate, Alicia Johnson squeezed Maya's hand, their matching university sweatshirts, a reminder of the future that had almost been denied them. Pride and relief mingled in Alicia's eyes as she surveyed the transformed terminal. "We're not invisible. Not anymore," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of their journey. Maya nodded, watching as Gregory Evans, the same employee who had blocked their path months ago, now efficiently scanned boarding passes with respectful nods to each passenger. His training under continental skies, new protocols, was evident in every interaction. When he reached the twins, recognition flickered across his face, followed by genuine respect. "Welcome aboard, Miss Johnson and Miss Johnson. Your first-class seats are ready," he said, his tone carrying none of the skepticism that had marked their first encounter. As they walked down the jet bridge, Maya felt the stares of other passengers, not suspicious or judgmental, but admiring. Many recognized them from news coverage of what the media had dubbed the Continental Revolution. A businessman even stood to offer a quiet "thank you" as they passed. Their father had transformed more than just company policy. Charles Johnson had ignited an industry-wide reckoning that reached beyond airlines into hotels, restaurants, and public spaces across America. The responsibility board he'd created, with input from Maya and Alicia, had become a model for corporations nationwide. Settling into her plush seat, Maya pulled out her smartphone, scrolling through messages from student groups at Boston University. They'd invited her to speak about advocacy and systemic change, a far cry from the frightened teenager who'd once hesitated to call her father for help. Alicia leaned over, pointing to a news alert. Calvin Harris, the IT director whose preserved evidence had proven crucial, had just been promoted to Chief Ethics Officer at Continental Skies. His quiet courage had been rewarded, just as Elena Morales' support had led to her supervisory role. "Did you ever imagine all this?" Alicia asked, gesturing around the cabin where flight attendants moved with new awareness and care. Maya shook her head, remembering the humiliation, the security checks that became interrogations, the restaurant that claimed to have no tables. Those memories would never fade. But they'd been transformed into something powerful. As the aircraft lifted into the sky, Maya looked back at the shrinking airport, her heart swelling with hope. What began as a simple fight for dignity had grown into a revolution, one that would echo through generations. Their visibility had become a beacon, illuminating paths for countless others who would no longer accept being unseen. The twins exchanged a look of quiet triumph. This was just the beginning.